Okay. Everyone having a good time at Dreamforce today? Yeah. Ooh, all right. How many people, this is their first time at Dreamforce? Awesome. Awesome. My 7th, so welcome to the party. My name is Rob Lamb. I am with the Salesforce.com Foundation. I've been at the foundation for about 6 months, but been at Salesforce for about 7 years. Ran our customer success program and our App Exchange partner program. But for the purposes of today, I really want to focus in on my experience in customer success, which, how many people feel honestly that they're getting everything they can out of Salesforce.com today? Awesome. Anybody raises your hand, you have to leave because you are a liar. There is a tremendous amount of capabilities in Salesforce, and what we really want to focus in on today is bring up our fabulous speakers here today and let them explain to you some of the business challenges they faced, the ways they use Salesforce.com to solve those challenges, and let you walk away with a few takeaways, hopefully some ideas, some inspiration, some envy, if you will, that you can take back to your organization and do some great things, even more so with Salesforce.com. Okay? So nothing I say can or will be held against me in a court of law today, and that also applies to my panelists. This is our safe harbor statement. As a publicly traded company, we are required to cover our, you know what I'm talking about. All right. So for me, value and Salesforce is an awesome combination. And what I mean by that is, if it's Salesforce is an incredibly powerful tool. We roll out things like Chatterday and all these functionality that keeps coming out. And what I always encourage people to do is to really focus in on the basics, because the real fundamental value proposition that Salesforce can deliver to an organization is generally by taking advantage of a few basic pieces of functionality, whether it's workflow, email templates, and really focusing in on the basics, the top 5, if you will. I always ask people to do that. But the key thing is to really create user success. Any administrators? Okay, so your primary responsibility is making sure that the hard work that you put into the application is actually leveraged by the people that use it. And it sounds pretty simple to do, but it really should be the #1 thing that you focus on. I always like to see people identify those key pain points. You can't solve every problem within the organization, but focus on the largest ones. And generally, you'll find the largest problems oftentimes have a very easy solution. So it's a really good way to approach it. Always put yourself in the shoes of your end user, right? If you're an administrator and you're working on projects and you're not engaging your end users to find out what's going on in their world, you're making a huge mistake and missing an enormous opportunity to improve the functionality of your organization. And then but not only target your projects, but really prioritize them. Look for the biggest pain with the easiest solutions, start there, and work towards the other end of the list. So the folks that I have behind me, I'm very excited to have Anil, Joan, and George. They're going to get up here. And like I said, they're going to do a brief intro themselves, show you what they've done with the application, leveraging some of the native functionality that's available to all of you, and then give you some key takeaways that you can take home to make the most out of Salesforce.com. Okay? Great. Let's get going. Anil.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Anil. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. The name of our organization is Framework Foundation, and our marquee program is called the Time Raiser. We've been using Salesforce right from the very beginning, and so what I wanted to show you a little bit of is how it's allowed us to scale relatively pain-free and do a lot with a very small resource base. We have 5 staff, 250 volunteers in 6 cities across Canada, and we work with multiple stakeholders, which our main point of contacts change all the time. I don't know if this is one of your largest challenges too, but in my day I get about 100 emails. I have to schedule dozens of tasks, so do my colleagues. So how do you manage all of this stuff? And what we really had to do in Salesforce is make that come to life. So some of the things I'm going to demo, rather than just use screenshots, is some custom objects, some formula fields, which are hugely powerful for anyone who's trying to track volunteer hours, network connections, etc. We built a very robust social media capability. We're completely integrated with Google Apps, and I can't tell you how easy for a non-technical shop it is for us to scale. And we've added some great apps from the App Exchange, Box.net, EchoSign, and one called Creately, which isn't part of the App Exchange, but it's very powerful. So just to give you a very, very brief introduction of our program, it's like speed dating for volunteerism. There's about 40 charities in this room. It's a little dark, but you can't see. There's people going around trying to match their skills with an organization's needs. And once you found a match to one of those organizations, you become eligible to bid on art. So you see some art on the walls. Rather than bidding money, you bid volunteer time. You have a winning bid, 12 months to finish your pledge. You get to bring the artwork home to the charity that you just volunteered with. None of the artists donate their work. We actually pay them market value. So we have a very robust win-win-win-win proposition for our artists, for the agencies, for our donors, and for the participants. So what's really important in our program is that we have a lot of people contributing to the work that we do. So we don't focus first and foremost on the technology and driving our decisions to configure Salesforce. It's really about the stakeholder view. So anyone who knocks on our door, if they want to give their time, their talent, their treasure, their network, every staff member is responsible for capturing that. And if they're not capturing those elements, it's their responsibility, and they get evaluated against it. So we really want to make sure that anyone who comes to our organization and wants to help, wants to see the Time Razer succeed, that these are some core elements. So to the demo that I want to do real quick is probably the best way to give you a sense of how Salesforce has saved our skin recently. We had our most recent Ottawa Time Razer, and that was scheduled, it was last Saturday. And we had to move it 2 weeks ago because there was a labor dispute at the venue that we were having it at. So within basically a week and a half, we had to let 500 people know, our artists, our agencies, our sponsors, our donors, etc., about the change. The way that we've configured this custom object, what we call community activities, so anything that's bound by date, time, location, you have some metrics. Again, what are the expenses? What are the participation goals? What are the volunteer needs, etc. We were able to catalog it right at the very beginning. We've been able to associate all of the artists and the artist IDs with it. We've been able to associate all of the agencies, etc. All of the special guests that had RSVP'd prior to the event changing locations. All of the people who had registered prior to the venue change. All of our corporate partners who have contributed money to the support of artists, and then all of our Google Docs, which are tightly integrated. So the net result was, because we use some of the basic functionality with Google Apps and Salesforce, using the power of making sure that our data was getting in there and getting in there clean, our team was able to make that venue change. We made the decision on Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, 6 hours later, 80% of everyone on that list was contacted with 100% degree certainty that they weren't going to show up at the War Museum and they were going to show up at the National Gallery. So for a little shop of ours, we were able to, again, make that transition real quick. So again, in the power of volunteer management, we use projects to define the bits and pieces of the volunteers who contribute their time and talent to our organization to make it go. So we've linked these specific projects. We had a kickoff night. We did some planning with some leadership volunteers. But what I wanted to bring you through was something called projects, because this is where it gets pretty exciting. Here's where we do all of our volunteer tracking. So in any given project, we're able to define strategic fit. And so all of the staff members are able to go in and add this stuff. So really important to get like one version of the truth, what the game plan is, what the goals are. So we use the help fields to allow all of our staff to really make sure that the stuff that goes in here rolls up real quick. That status image could have easily been a red or something even worse if we didn't have this stuff combined, but it was all there. It was all neatly put together. So again, even on the very specifics of how do you plan, administer, and report on your volunteer projects and people who are participating in your work, we spend a lot of time in advance of each event making sure that what is the staff time that's required, the volunteer time, the participation goals, the number of volunteers who are going to help the night of the Time Razer, not the people attending, but the people helping out the night of. And we go through and we add all of this stuff. So every little line item project that we have can roll up really nicely. As you can see, we've used the functionality of project contacts to enter in who our volunteers are. And with the help of, actually, no, I'll just scroll down a little bit. And you can see all of the activity history. If I was to drill down on that list, you would see my other colleagues and some of our other volunteers who all made sure that our information was being streamlined. So our ability to understand everything that's going on around our organization is really comprehensive. We developed a visual force page to track the hours. So we have Ian Hayes in the room here from Break Even Solutions that helped us do that. And this is super powerful for anyone who's been frustrated with tracking volunteer hours. This solution here, you literally can go in and pick your volunteers that are part of the project, you put in their hours, you put in the due date, the subject and comments, and away you go. So it allows for a lot of on-the-fly type of volunteer management tracking, member management tracking. Okay, and so now I'm going to go to one of our volunteers, because now I want to show you some of the really fun functionality in formula fields. So one of our volunteers, Kathleen, participated at that time raiser in Ottawa. She was driving up from Toronto. She's based out of Toronto, but she loves our program so much she's traveled to different cities to help us do it. And as you can see here, what we try to do is track what we call her civic footprint to our organization, her time, her talent, her treasure, her networks. So here you can see the projects that she's participated in. So she actually was a part of that team that helped out in Ottawa. And what becomes really, really fun and interesting, say for instance, she decided to come to Dreamforce, if this was another community activity that we were somehow involved in. I could go in and type in Dreamforce 2009, because I've already put it in there. This is some of our language here on pledge type, so we're just going to ignore that. And hit save. And we're going to go back to Kathleen's record real quick. And what you're going to see, sometimes it takes a sec to propagate, but that participation is going to go from 0 to 1. And we can do the same for network connection. So for anyone here who's deeply involved in nonprofit and voluntary organizations, which I suspect most are, your network is your most important asset base. So if you're not doing a good job of making sure and tracking what are the relationships, what are the connections are made, your organization loses the richness of it. So for us, this network connection becomes really powerful. So again, what you can do is we have a spot down here for network connections. And so you can go in and put the name of the organization, and I'm going to say it is Break Even Solutions, and it is Ian Hayes, so you can get little pop-up boxes. And Kathleen connected us to Ian, and if I was to go in, I would normally put in the detail, but to save time, I'm not. Hit save, and again, what you're going to see in that roll-up field, if we go back to Kathleen's record, is, there we go, it popped up number 1. So you can get a really good sense of how people are engaged in the work that you do. Part of the power of what we find in the native functionality in Salesforce too, again, is just the communications that go out. If I go back to the community activity that we have listed, sorry, I'm going to go back to where is it? Here we go. The time raiser in Ottawa. The ability to have our Google spreadsheets embedded for anyone who, again, is looking to do a budget on the fly, looking to add information real quick, the ability to collaborate on a real-time document, have that integrated here, so you can see some of our lists here, is unbelievably powerful. So what it's allowed our group to do, and this is what we're most excited about, that 75% of all of our organizational information, whether it's our internal annual plan, budget documents, marketing templates, our external programming, how we do time raisers, executive summaries, is accessible not to just anyone in the organization, but anyone in the world in less than a minute's request, because we've done a good job of packaging this information. So anyone who feels that you're frustrated in a nonprofit, you have all these things happening, you have to be fast, you have to be agile and resilient. And so these integrated tools using some of the native functionality really allows that to happen. So the other piece that has stemmed from configuring Salesforce the way that we have, making sure that we have a very strong stakeholder view, is that we can launch high-skilled volunteer projects really fast. So anyone who's frustrated with a high-skilled volunteer knocking on their door saying, I'd like to help, and your organization not being as responsive as possible, we literally are able to launch high-skilled volunteer projects in hours. And in those hours, the methodology that we've put together is, in fact, having ripple effects back home where it's affecting public policy on the types of skills that are being developed in the sector. So again, we have all of that sort of detail, but the power of a small organization taking the most of this functionality is super, super powerful. So in my where's the key takeaways here? So the key takeaways for this presentation is really don't code yourself into a box. Like, really take the time to understand your stakeholders, because it will change over time. We found it particularly so where our relationship with some of our artists or our donors changed. And if you build a whole bunch of workflow rules in advance of really understanding how they interact with your organization or how you can grow with them, you end up coding yourself into a wall, and or bumping into things, and it can be very problematic. So again, the results is we've been able to reduce some of our operational costs by 50%. We've almost tripled our productivity. So again, we're an organization with less than $1 million in revenue. We have 5 staff, and we're able to do so much more than what we would have been able to do without these products in place. So thank you very much. I'll be taking it.
So I have to tell you, after 5 years of being on the corporate side and now coming over to the nonprofit side, I love my customers. One quick thing. I mean, the great challenge that we had when we were putting this presentation together was not getting people to speak for 15 minutes, but trying to limit them to 15 minutes, because they had so much they wanted to share and so much they wanted to offer you all as help. I think one of the things you said that was really interesting is that don't coding yourself into a box. Everybody should start, when you're planning out your next project with Salesforce, don't start coding. Start writing on a whiteboard. Start getting the key stakeholders in the room, draw it out, visualize it, and then take the time to implement it. And if you have problems doing that, that's when you're going to call us and our team, and we're going to help you. And I think everyone's going to be around after for Q&A, but then I'm sure that you can hog time in the hall for a bit and get all your questions answered, because I'm sure you have a few. So, Joan, do you want to come on up and speak?
Where's the clicker? Oh, here we go. Okay, we'll move right to the next slide. Okay, I'm Joan Nolan. I work for Educational Testing Service. Some of you may already be familiar with us. We administer over 50 million tests each year for TOEIC, TOEFL, GRE, and Praxis. We also manage the operations of the advanced placement and SAT for the College Board. Now, we don't use Salesforce to manage those operations, but we do use it to manage our relationships with educational institutions as well as with consultants. What I thought I'd do today is provide you a brief glimpse into 3 of the custom applications that we've developed using native functionality. The first one uses web-to-lead marketing. The second uses a custom contract object to manage our contracts with our consultants. And the third is just a brief glimpse into how to set up Salesforce to Salesforce functionality so you can communicate with your partners. Let me just go right into our, is this one ours? Nope. Here we go. All right, so we'll start with the marketing one. ETS uses web-to-lead forms to manage requests for information and registrations for events such as webinars and forums. In developing this strategy, we needed to define not only what type of information we were looking to achieve, but also preferred operating practices to help manage the efficiency of information being and project requests within our organization. So what we decided to do is use campaign record types to clarify different calls to action, and then build our page layout so that we were capturing just the type of information for that particular call. This is an example of a campaign for a webinar registration. You'll notice at the top of the page we have information about the session details. Down below, we have information about the target audience, who's requesting or managing this campaign, as well as requested follow-up. Now, whenever possible, we've used pick lists, either single or multi-pick lists, and as well as dependent pick lists. And we did this to standardize the format that information was being captured. And that helps us to provide reports, more meaningful reports. We've also taken advantage of the help text so that anytime there's a field there where it might not be clear what type of information is being captured, we provide this insight to our users. Now, on many registration forms, there's more than one session that a person can register for. And so what we've done is we've set up parent campaigns that can be used to associate various campaigns associated with a single form. So this is a parent campaign. Notice there's no session details at the top, but if you scroll down, you'll see the related campaigns for the different sessions associated with this initiative. Once a marketing manager has entered information for this particular set of webinars, they can actually scroll down to the web form section, and they can actually request a web form right from Salesforce. So what we've done is we've built a button that is linked to a ClickTools form, and it's pre-populated with information based on who's logged into the system. And here the marketing manager can request that a project be initiated to create the form. Now, as they go through this, it's very interactive, and it asks for the questions that we need answers to before we can get started. When they hit the submit button, a new project is entered into an internal Salesforce application designed to manage admin requests. We then use workflow to create a new task and to send me an email notifying me of the request. At that point, I can just reassign the task based on staff availability. I don't need to reiterate any of the project requirements because they're already tracked in Salesforce. Now, this is all well and good for managing our registrations, but it doesn't really provide us with information on what type of outreaches are working and which ones are less effective. And this is very important in determining return on investment and really prioritizing workload. So to do this, we could have just used the lead source field and said, okay, how did you hear about us? Is it through a website? Is it through an email? Is it through an educational journal? Or we could come up with another method where we could drill down and find more specific information about the particular outreach. So we wanted to come up with a plan that was very user-friendly to the prospects, but also did not create a lot of added work for us. So we didn't want to create a new form to reflect each outreach. So this is what we came up with. We're going to go down to the next one here. We set up a related object where we actually capture metrics regarding the specific outreach. And you'll notice, you'll notice here we've formatted our pick list options to start with an acronym of a fixed length followed by a description of the specific metric. What this did is it enabled us to use a formula field to actually create a destination URL that has embedded information about the specific marketing outreach in the query string. This information would be interpreted on the web to lead form so that we would be capturing all of these details as leads are being entered. Now, to streamline our operations, we've taken advantage of communication templates. So our marketing manager can scroll down and send an email, pull up the communication template that says, they want to request a redirect. All of the information from the campaign is merged into that email, as well as the link back to this particular record. Once our web traffic manager creates the redirect and responds, the marketing manager can then update the actual redirect that has been requested and update the status to implement it. Once it's been implemented, we have workflow that updates the destination URL down here based on the value of the formula field. Now that does seem a little bit redundant, but what it does is it locks in that value in the event that we change the formula field down the road. This is pretty much a work in progress. Our marketing metrics may change over a period of time, so we wanted to make sure that our historical information was safe. The other thing that we did is we set up validation so that once the status is implemented, no changes can be made on any of the key metric fields. However, you have the flexibility to add information like description or the actual cost or release dates on information. So basically what this has done is it streamlined our internal operations while giving a very clean view from our prospects. We're capturing a lot of information about specific ROI on specific outreaches without hindering the prospect's view. Now the next thing I wanted to show you, we're going to shift gears a little bit, is how we manage our contracts for consultants that write test items for us. Basically, we were challenged with coming up with a system that would allow us to query available consultants based on their experience and their performance and create contracts, manage the contracts, and manage payment for services rendered. So what we did is we created a record type for our contacts with a K-12 consultant record type, and then they're entered as contacts. We've used the unique field to classify an acronym for each consultant. We've also set up a SharePoint folder that we link to right from Salesforce, and this SharePoint folder provides documentation regarding payment information and regarding signed contracts. We then used a custom object to create a contract record. Now, we didn't use the contracts already in Salesforce because these contracts are associated with individuals rather than accounts. We use validation to ensure that our expiration date follows our initial date. We also use lookup fields to link this contract to a specific project and a specific project codes used for billing information. The next thing we had to do is identify assignments associated with these contracts. These contracts are very specific. They're not related on time or hours worked. They're really based on the amount of items that are written. And the requests are very specific. They might be multiple choice questions. They might be prompts for essays. So basically what we've done is we've set up two tables. One is an items requested table to classify the assignments, and then an items received table. And this has been set up with a master detail relationship, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm going to go to the items requested. You'll see here we have requests for the content areas, a specialty within the content area, the type of question, and then say a rate. And this is all fictitious information, so we don't pay them $10. We use a formula field to calculate the total value of the particular assignment. We then have this update description button, and what this does is it actually updates the text in the description field based on the data that's entered up above. And this is formatted in a method that can be used in our contracts. So what this allows us to do is to generate the contract straight from Salesforce using Conga merge functionality. So once all of the assignments have been entered, user goes up to the contract record, presses the generate contract button, it creates a PDF in the approved format for these types of contracts. So basically we don't need to get legal involved each time. Everything is set in stone, and they don't have the flexibility to change it beyond what's entered in Salesforce. Now, a lot of times when items are written, they come in batches. There might be a request for 20 items, and they might submit 15 now, and they might submit 10 at a later date. And so that's why we have this master detail relationship with our items received. The value of setting it up in this way is we can actually use roll-up summary fields to calculate the total quantity of items that have been received and the total quantity that have been accepted. With that information, we can then look at the percent, calculate the percent fulfillment on this particular assignment, as well as what is the acceptance rate for this particular assignment. And this really broadens the type of information and the value of the reporting that we can provide, because not only can we look at what this particular consultant has provided, we can look at this from a project perspective, we can look at it from a financial perspective, and we can look at it from a performance perspective. And when we look at the performance, it's not just based on this contract. We can actually segment the data based on the type of question, based on the grade level of question. It really gives us a flexibility to understand who are the quality performers, and if we needed a quick assignment, who's responds in a timely fashion. In addition, on the items received section, we capture information in dates to reflect the different stages in the process, and then we use a formula field to classify where they are in that process. And that helps set the stage to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, while giving us the flexibility to report on how long, what our turnaround time is at each stage. Now, when we developed this application, which took under 3 months to develop, the team down in our San Antonio office was a bit apprehensive about going to a new system. They had been relying heavily on personal spreadsheets and shared information, but they were a bit hesitant with learning a new system. So knowing this ahead of time, we took a phased approach to training, where we started off with face-to-face exposure, where we just did an overview and a demo, followed by doing some test cases. And then on the following day, we did a work session where they all brought their work to a computer lab, and they started doing their daily routine and asking questions. And if there were any issues, like people thought this would take too much time, we would discuss the options, and we would show them ways that they could use Salesforce to their advantage. In addition, we had follow-up sessions that were online, where we had question and answer periods, as well as more advanced training. Once we went through the initial setup, we created a training document that actually goes through just their application from beginning to end. It includes screenshots, it includes definitions for the different options of pick list values, and it basically takes them from the beginning of the process to the end. And this was really valuable in many ways. First of all, just creating this document meant that they really had to standardize their processes. They couldn't be wishy-washy. They knew what they were getting. Secondly, it helped us to know their process right down to the granular level, so we could identify any enhancements that may not have even occurred to them. And then they had this as a resource during their initial training and transition period, but also down the road as new staff comes on board. So basically, they ended up with a system where they could manage all of their information. They have continuity from as staff changes, and it's actually been a very successful rollout. Now, I realize I'm taking a lot of time. I'm going to be really sorry. I knew this was going to happen. My last thing, Salesforce to Salesforce. Can we get to this page? Why is it not going? Salesforce to Salesforce is used to communicate with partners, and what you can do once it's enabled is you can send an email to a partner, and once they accept it, you can set up the your instance so that it shares information with them. I think this froze. I can't. Okay. Once you extend sharing to that information and they've accepted that, you can basically publish objects and fields within the object that you wish to share. Once both partners have shared that information, you can then subscribe to each other's information, and you basically map your objects to their objects. And then once you've set up that mapping, and you can do it right down to pick list values, then you can go and you set up an external sharing related list on your page layout for records you wish to share. At that point, staff can click on the forward this opportunity or forward this contact over to the partner's instance, and they can then accept that record. When they accept it, it creates a complementary record on their instance, and the mapped fields will be updated by either partner. What this does is it helps you to provide a uniform service to your customers or prospects, regardless of whether they're contacting you or your partner. So let me see if I can get down to back to the PowerPoint, because this is locked. Okay. For key takeaways, normally the simple sessions or the simpler solutions are the best, but what you really want to do is look at things not only from the results you're looking for, but also from the processes and the user's perspective. You want to make it as simple as possible, include validation where possible to QC data at the time it's being entered, expand your role of your reports using formula fields, and take training very seriously. I'm done. Thank you.
So now that she's done, I will tell you, no, not that it took too long. That's not what I was saying. I have never had a presenter more nervous than Joan was, and I thought she did an awesome job in front of us. Are you looking forward to coming back next year and doing it again? Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. All right. So a couple of things that I got from Joan. Number one, the concept that I hadn't really thought about is sort of reverse engineering your process. So a lot of folks find it really helpful to start with the reports that they want to get out of the system, the information, the intelligence, the metrics that they want to measure, and it's kind of an interesting place to sort of reverse engineer back into building the application. The other thing was really the training. The training manual, you don't see that very often, but that is an awesome tool. The very specific things, I've seen things done in the form of mouse pads. I've seen, one-page laminate just focusing on the key things. But the idea of reinforcing the hard work that you've done and driving adoption by making sure people understand the value proposition, sharing the value proposition, and then reinforce it with the training, I thought was great. Okay. So I think we are frozen, just by the way. All right, great.
Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Let's see if it'll back up. Oh, okay, maybe that one didn't. Well, get us out of there. Maybe we should close these. All right, now try it.
Should we go? Okay. All right, George. How about it? Let me just jump right into it, George.
All right. All right. Do we have anybody who is from a government organization in the audience? One person. 3. Okay. Your biggest challenge, as with all nonprofits, is the ability to report on metrics to those who give you money, right? Whether it's the legislature, whether it's foundations, whether it's sponsors, whatever. One of the things that we faced as an organization, I come from, let's see here. Yeah. Okay, I come from the Department of Community and Culture in the state of Utah, and it's made up of 6 divisions, primarily those divisions that didn't have a home in any other department. They just kind of lumped into a potpourri of organizations. So we have Utah State History, the Arts Council, Housing and Community Development, the state libraries, Indian Affairs, and Ethnic Affairs. We began using, meaning the Arts Council, began using Salesforce about 3 years ago to solve a particular problem, federal reporting to the National Endowment for the Arts. And from that, it kind of became the hub around which all of our business processes revolve. And then word got out that this little itty-bitty division, the Arts Council, was using this outstanding CRM. Excuse me. They had deployed it within weeks, and the Governor's Office of Economic Development had, a competitor, I won't name them, and after 4 months, they bagged the whole implementation because they just could not get it up and running. So they heard about it, and word has spread. Our whole department now, this past year, is using it. We have 75 seats, but we'll be expanding in 2010. We have about 200 or 300 people in our department, but it's a slow process, as you all know, those of you who are just beginning to implement. Let's see, some of the problems that we faced, few metrics. Our IT director did a scan of all the network drives in our department, and there are like 4,000 discrete databases out there, just access databases. That's not including what people have in Excel spreadsheets, in Word documents, in FileMaker Pro, whatever. And 3,200 of those are in state history. Who figured that? The information is all siloed. When someone retires, the institutional memory goes with that person. We have a lot of manual business processes, and of course, reporting challenges, which I mentioned at the top. So I'm going to give you like 3 case studies on how we were able to use the native functionality within Salesforce to address those issues. The first one was reporting activities in legislative districts. Okay, every year, in January, February, and March, we have a part-time legislature. They meet, they discuss budget. We have a balanced budget amendment, so everything has to be within, our limitations in terms of our fiscal notes. And at any given moment, we could get a telephone call to the director that says, Senator so-and-so needs this kind of a report by this time. And it would literally take us a week to gather all the information from the disparate areas and call it together and present it in some kind of intelligible manner. So tracking activities in legislative districts is important. District information, a lot of times it's dated, and the metrics challenge. So what we did was we created a custom button, which I'll show you in a minute, that makes a web service call to a data warehouse, brings back the legislative information into Salesforce and populates those fields. There's about 10 fields. Our second case study had to do with reporting media and press activity. Of course, every department and division is keenly aware of the perceptions that they are communicating in the various channels of communication. Traditional media, the newspapers, the radio, TV, so on. The solution for that was to build a media and press tracking, which was a custom object. We'll show that in a minute. And then the third case had to do with how do we perform online panel reviews of grants, competitions, and fellowships, that kind of thing, where there's money involved, there's a peer review process involved, and for that we used the CRM's customer portal. We have been, our administrative costs for administering a $500 grant has been $129. That really sucks. Yeah. Our panelists, because Utah is so spread out, our panelists sometimes travel 4 to 5 hours to go to a panel review. And we've never had any kind of measurable criteria for evaluating the applications. Basically, people got into a room, they hadn't read the booklets that they were given for particular grants, and they go in and tell stories about the organizations and the artists to whom we were supposed to be giving money. So let me get to the live demonstration here. Okay, the first thing is chosen one of our biggest organizations, Utah Symphony and Opera. All right, so in order to do reporting according to Senate and House districts and so forth, what we did was we created this button, Update Legislative Information, for every single account record. It makes a web service call up to a data warehouse that sits on the Capitol Hill that has all the districts, all the geolocation codes, the boundary codes, everything is up there. And we brought back key information for this particular account record based on their address. So what you're going to see is the school district filled out, the county, because who memorizes where, you know, certain cities are in what county. All this information here, which is legislative information, and 2 sets of geolocation codes, 2 different standard sets of geolocation codes. Why? For future, we're going to create some mobile apps that will tell you where libraries are, where museums are, where whatever for tourists. Now, hopefully, if everything goes right, in a couple of seconds, it's got to go over the mountains. You remember now, okay? It's coming back with this information then in just a couple of seconds. The county, all the geolocation codes here, and the legislative and the Senate district. So that was one way, a very simple thing, a custom button with a simple routine, not totally simple, but you know, to solve that particular issue. All right, the second issue, which was media tracking. If I'm the executive director of our department, and I want to know how the public is perceiving my divisions within the department, I can go to any of the records of my department and scroll down to this area here, media and press coverage. And at a glance, simply by the rating flag, and there's just 3 ratings, positive, neutral, or negative, I can see how we're doing. I can drill down into any record, let's say this one, Park City, and I can look at the article itself and read it. And what is that? Is that a PDF? This is actually a JPEG. It's just a JPEG of the article that's been attached to the object. And then there's a cool little tool on the App Exchange. It's free. It's just an attachment viewer. You put in, it's a video or a Visualforce page item, and you just put it in here, and it'll show that anything that's a JPEG that is attached to that particular object. So that's how we track our media and press coverage. And then the third case study, which was how do we do the portal for our panel reviews. First of all, we're in the process of implementing a grants management system. I'm going to briefly show you the front end, which is here. This is the public-facing side. And they go in, and they can see the grants that are available to them, the applications that they have started already, and they can fill it out at their leisure. Several people can work on one grant application because a lot of times organizations have development officers as well as the financial officers who have different kinds of information. They can work on it at the same time. So once they submit it, then we have to do a panel review process, and to do that, we use the customer portal. And I'm going to log in as Jack Daniels, a reviewer, okay? And using the customer portal, and we can activate these on a rotating basis. We have 75 licenses, but we don't use nearly that many. You know, as a panel is formed, we just activate them. And they come in, and this is just simply an HTML section that you can create and interchange with other HTML sections. And then this is directly from Salesforce, the application evaluations. And they go in and they see what is in progress and what is still to be reviewed. Of course, I've got a zillion in there because I've been doing a lot of testing on different grants. Normally, they'd only see one grant type. Then they can go in and continue on in an application. And now we're getting metrics. Finally, we can tell an organization, well, you really scored this much on management, this much on artistic excellence, and this much on public accessibility. And we have real metrics instead of saying, well, you know, you're just not doing it right kind of thing. I mean, that's just, anyway, so we can go into any of these tabs, and these are coming directly from the grants management piece. We can download any collateral information like documents, and they can look at that as well. The objective questions are scored automatically, and then I can give a score, let's just say 4 or whatever. I can add a comment. And then, you know, save it to come back. And those comments would be available for the organizations eventually. And then if I'm an evaluator, and this might take, you know, a couple weeks, I can also see how I'm doing in terms of my evaluations and the scores and whether they're balanced across the board. I have a little report. This is coming directly from Salesforce. There's nothing new here. It's all native functionality. Okay. So key takeaways. Well, you can do anything you want if you can conceive of it. The stuff that's out of the box in Salesforce is sufficient. You can customize it up the wazoo if you'd like. You just have to think about what it is that you want, what's the end product that you want, work backwards, and you'll get there. You'll solve those problems. You'll get the reports you need, the metrics that you need, and thank you very much.
So we have a few minutes left for Q&A. Did want to mention that if you do want to ask a question, please come to the microphone because we'll be putting you on tape or some sort of digital media of sorts. And also, please take the time to help us make these sessions better by taking the time to go outside and give us a quick review. Great. Go ahead.
Hi. Nice job by all of you. Thank you. Quick question for you and other people in the room. One of the struggles I'm having is to track the fundraising, or what you would call the financials around your targets, in whether it's grants or whether it's individual donors or whether it's, have any of you been successful in that from the nonprofit side?
So which financials are you trying to track? The income statements? You know, do you want to get that far into it, or is it more just the amounts that are raised?
Pledges versus actuals.
pledges versus actuals.
Yeah,
So
that's what we're struggling with.
so there's certainly certainly a number of ways that you can do it within the application itself, leveraging calculated fields. One of the things that I've seen lately that I really like is when a donor reaches a certain, one of the things people like to do is when a donor reaches a certain stage. So people have their different tiers of donors, their silver, their gold donors, what have you. Leveraging calculated fields to kind of do a roll-up of all of the historical donations, and then tracking sort of their lifetime value is something it's in the nonprofit starter pack, which there's a whole bunch of people down. For those of you who don't know, the nonprofit sort of help desk, if you will, is if you go all the way back to the back right corner, they give us the sweet back left. Excuse me, back left corner. They give us the sweet location at the foundation, but we're way in the back by the lunch area. So come on by, and we've got to help you show you what we can do. Okay. Anything else?
I have a question about the project. Was that native to Salesforce? Your projects that you were doing, the project tab with the theme or time raiser, there was a project tab.
We created that.
Okay.
But just out of create custom object in Salesforce.
Okay.
So if you go to setup and then go create custom objects, we did all of the naming conventions and just added that and rolled that into the other pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the, those of you who've been working with Salesforce for a long time know that when Salesforce, the development process, the iterations, the various upgrades that we do are all driven by our customers. And what it's accomplished for us is an incredible tool set to solve the problems that you have. So I think it was George who mentioned, your only limitation is what you can imagine, for the most part, except for some certain issues which we don't need to get into today because we're having a great time. But but what I would challenge you to do is to take kind of this inspiration back. Perhaps you've got a few great things that you can take and actually turn into actionable items back at your organization. But also just to go back with the idea of customer envy, which is a theme that I love to employ with folks. Look for the coolest thing that you've ever seen. Then give us a call and let us help you implement it in your organization. And challenge us. Challenge us at the foundation with our staff. If we can't help you, we're going to refer you to one of our sales engineers. If they can't help you, we're going to send you to one of our product managers. And they love it when we do that, by the way. But the goal for us is to really be extremely customer-centric, extremely solution-oriented, and love to be challenged with things that we've never seen before because that's what makes the product better.
Thanks so much for your presentations. I really enjoyed learning about how you guys were able to utilize all the different native tools on Salesforce. I had a question actually on your media and press release tool. Is that connected to your website? So when you publish a press release or a media hit, it goes directly to your website as a link?
No, not yet. We're actually in various stages of development for that. Sorry. No, it isn't. We're actually in various stages of development for that particular piece. We anticipate, for example, a web service call to Google Analytics for website hits that will populate another object, and that'll be rolled into kind of a big report that includes press releases as well as hits on the web and so on and so forth.
So it's mainly a tool for just tracking the hits you get,
Yeah.
not really to publish them on your
Not
website.
hits, but in order to see how effective we are in press releases, because press releases, they're launched and they go into the ether. We don't know if services are picking them up and actually publishing them, and that's what we're trying to do is see in what regions, for example, they are actually doing that. And if they're not, then we want to approach them and say, hey, we have so many people in your area where they need to get this information, that kind of thing.
I'll just add to that, you should really check out box.net and the integration with Salesforce, because for pretty low cost, and you can publish stuff directly from your Salesforce instance in Box, publish it to your website, and you can track who downloads it, etc. So for an easy, real quick thing to do, you want to check out their app. What is it again? box.net. They have a booth somewhere down below.
I just had a quick question. None of you talked about anything related to donations or fundraising, and I'm wondering if that's because that works so well that you don't think about it, or because you're using something else, or because it's not something that your organization does.
Yeah, I'll add to that if you want to stick around for the next session, but the focus was, the focus was just on native functionality, not necessarily pertinent to fundraising and donation management.
I have a question. I forgot your name, to the gentleman from Utah. The legislative information feature, we're an advocacy group, and so we've been dreaming about that. Could you tell us a little more about that and sort of where you're pulling the data from, and a little more about how that works?
We have a repository for a lot of data from various departments. I can't remember. It's AGRC is the acronym. I think it stands for Associated Geographic Research Council. And they have a huge database up there. It's a GIS database. And so they use that to map the legislative districts using the geolocation codes, the addresses. They have stuff for the school districts and so on and so forth. You just have to know where to go get the information. A lot of times your state agencies will have started already a digitization initiative, and they've got it somewhere. You just have to tap into where it is. The feds, they've got tons and tons of data. There's all kinds of registries out there. The GIS folks know about registries where data is openly available for whatever purpose you need it for.
So the blinking red light and the timeout sign I'm getting from the back of the room tells us that it is time to go. Thank you so much for being here. Next session is donor management. Stick around. We're going to cover a lot of that. Thank you, everybody.